Here we go. Yeah, welcome back. Cambridge Inside Out, second half of our bi-weekly. Is it bi-weekly or bi-monthly? Yeah,
Buy American,
bi,
right?
yeah.
So, so another thing of some significance that was on the City Council agenda for November 2nd was
It's
an item that
right.
was
Yeah,
made subject to the charter right at the
right.
previous meeting of October 26th, namely a proposal, one that has been discussed before
Yeah,
in various iterations about municipal campaign finance and limitations on donations. This was
right.
really coming from Dennis Carlone, but honestly, really from City of Somerville. And I've no doubt it's Matt McLaughlin, Carlo's aide, is the sort of the
He's
conduit
still
of,
his aide? Wow.
I believe so, yeah. It is a little weird having a
It's
Somerville
good.
counselor working
Sorry.
as an
Yeah,
aide.
it's never.
Right. But the thing is that there's, if you go back, because, I still do those Cambridge candidate pages, and I suppose
Yeah,
I'll do them again next year. But
good.
one of the things that every year, every municipal election year comes up is people advocating for municipal campaign finance. Usually the way it works on the calendar is they start talking about it far too late, so
Yeah.
that there's a tacit acknowledgement that in fact they won't be able to implement it for the next election.
I don't
And
want ever see that. I'm sorry. There's 26 candidates. How are you going to determine who gets money? I'm not going to fund some of these
well,
people.
that's there's the two matters. One that they
I,
are not currently discussing, which is the idea of
right.
public
That's
financing of
good.
municipal
I
elections.
understand that. Yeah.
And
But I'm saying,
I'm not keen to the idea, though. I've always said I'm willing to be convinced,
of what?
right?
Financing it?
Yeah, but the thing is, I'm just not there. I'm just
Oh,
not there.
they'd have to do a lot of pre-qualification for me to even do.
Yeah. And I think another thing, it's a bottom line consideration, at least from my point of view right now, is that even at, even when you go look at not just municipal elections, but state elections, federal elections, money is not the same mother's milk, as Tip O'Neill used to say, of politics as it
Yeah.
once was.
Wow.
Right. The thing is that internet resources, social media, you still need people to sort of manage it all and
Well,
make it all
more on
happen.
a local level, not so much federal, because you've got.
But even at a federal level, it's like, is a question, is it the big TV buy that's what's convincing voters these days, or is
Well,
it social media?
well, when you have $100 million spent on an election, it's an election in Georgia. I think it's whatever. I'm just saying, yeah.
Well, the thing is a lot of that is there because,
Oh,
Georgia was viewed
hey,
as sort of like a flashpoint because I think largely Lindsey Graham.
oh God, get rid of him.
And what happened there then is that all you had to do was ring up potential donors across the country and say, contribute money. And they'd say, sure, just tell me where to send the check. So
Yeah,
I think they had more money than they even needed as a result of
I
that.
mean, I got an appeal from his campaign, Jamie Harrison, after I'd heard he raised 50 cents. I said, really? I said, I support the guy, but I don't think you need more money from me. I'm sorry, that's enough.
Right. I don't think the money is what's convincing the voters so much anymore. I mean, it's different from years past where, billboards and skywriting and
I
gigantic
see what
rallies or
you're saying now.
whatever.
Yeah, but a lot of these centers rely on the NRA money. They rely on the big. I mean, I'm just saying we could get rid of that kind of thing. But you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think I still wonder, I think there are some spectacular examples, and I'm thinking of California in particular, of candidates who had boatloads of money and who lost.
Yeah.
And I think I think Obama really, and not just Obama, but Obama's tech savvy people, they completely changed the way politics and the
Oh,
effectiveness of politics
tell me
work.
that he changed it in '08. He
Yeah,
really
and
did.
and much as I dislike him, I'll say even locally, Nadeem Mazin actually showed how you can do that at the local level too.
That's true.
And deserves a lot of credit for doing
Yeah.
a very, very credible, effective campaign, at the local level, just using all the tools that are actually available these days.
Well, I
You
think
know,
that is the name of the game. You're right. You've got to know
right?
how to do that.
So people still talk a lot about money in politics and the sort of the corruptive nature of it. I think it's still a concern primarily when you're talking about somebody who just wants to have an intimidating war chest.
Yeah.
And if they're taking in big donations from major interests with lobbying, lobbyists, like the NRA, but not exclusively NRA, So that what it does is it actually scares off potential candidates. That to me is the bigger concern.
Yeah.
It's the gigantic war chest that is so intimidating that people are effectively running unopposed. You know,
Yeah.
at the local level, that's just not it's
Yeah.
just not even a
So,
factor. So
so what do you think? I mean, there was the original, well, the policy order, which says mainly from developers and
right. So I thought that was a
doing
fundamental error.
wait, people doing business before the city, which it did not include cannabis, did it? Or
No, it did not. It did
but
not. Or at least I don't believe it did. So,
although if
you
it's
know,
people doing business before the city, you'd have to
that's
include.
a little bit different. You know, it's a different metric than what's been used in the past. Usually what has been done, and I've, listen, I put it out there on web pages and whatever, follow the money was the phrase I used in 2019, because I think it's interesting information, and let the voters make judgments on their own. If 60% of somebody's campaign finance is derived from people who have
Right.
business before the city, and a voter knows that, a voter might say, I'm not voting for that person.
And
And
it's
that
all public information.
and it's public information. Personally, I'm satisfied with simply getting that information out and then let voters judge
Okay.
on their own.
You know what? You have said this, and I totally agree with you. They're always talk about the money and the two. Why not just have a voluntary cap of like $25,000, which is still a lot of money, and that's it. I mean, and then maybe underneath that it should be to whatever. But no one is talking about that. No one has
You
said
know,
voluntary, because then if you see they've raised more than that, well,
I think if we had a very consistent, widely read public newspaper or other public media that
but
was
we
almost
do.
universal,
We have you,
well,
we have Cambridge
but,
Day, we have
yeah, but the thing is,
we have other things. We have
but it's
Cambridge.
still, the readership is sporadic for all of the above.
Well,
And I mean, I'll say the candidate pages right in the days leading to election are extremely well utilized.
yeah.
But the thing is, other than that, if somebody's simply putting out information about campaign finance, yeah, people sort of do. Some people do, some people don't. I wish we could make it a little bit more ever present and out front, so that candidates would feel some obligation to take voluntary
I,
pledges.
I think
To,
we're getting there. I
I
think.
think we could get there, but I think we all have to step up our game in terms of getting public
All right.
information.
So, what do you think about McGovern's thing about it should be 200 no matter who it is, and limit family? Or wait, was it Alana Malin, uh, Vice Mayor, excuse me, that said uh, from you can't fund your no, it wasn't McGovern. You can't fund your own campaign more than
Okay, so that actually
$2,000.
to me was absurd.
Oh,
Um,
tell me
I
what.
mean, I think wouldn't it be nice if you could say that? But if
Well, which one? The funding your own campaign?
yeah, sort of, you
Oh,
cannot. There is no way on God's green earth,
yeah.
especially in the age of Citizens United and others,
Yeah.
that where they say money is speech, that you can tell a candidate that you're not allowed to spend your own money
But you know what? If you're
on
the
your own
incumbent,
campaign.
you're getting paid well to be that counselor. I think you can afford it.
You absolutely could, but the point is that just from a legal point of view, I will preemptively tell you what Nancy Glow is going to say on that, which is that you
Okay.
cannot restrict. You
Okay.
can't do it federally. You cannot do it at the state level, and you certainly can't do it locally.
Okay.
To say you cannot loan your own money to your own campaign.
Okay. All right. Speaking of that, legally, even if you say they propose this $200 thing, or maybe does that require state?
Yes.
Okay. So tell me.
I think actually most of this ultimately, there may be some exceptions where you don't have to file a home rule petition
So
to.
even car loans from the real that would require a home rule.
There seemed to be some indication that Somerville did something akin to this, and I don't remember if
Right.
anybody said they needed home rule legislation
I
in
don't
order to
think
be
they did,
permitted.
but I think the thing that McGovern maybe is proposing would, because that's really restricting anybody's.
Yeah, well,
Right?
I think that what makes the Somerville one work
Yeah.
is basically the prohibition isn't against the candidate receiving the money. It's basically says if you are the person with the business before the city and you make the donation, you ain't going to get the business from the city anymore, right? Is that, I mean, maybe I'm
Is that what it
misinterpreting it.
says?
Well, the thing is that if you go beyond your $200 limit, they actually put something like a 4-year period afterwards too, when
Oh,
you
right, right.
wouldn't be able to make those donations.
Huh.
Yes, I mean, the thing is, if you're talking about entering into contracts with the city, you can put conditions on that. I think that doesn't require state approval to do that.
So
But
maybe
the
that,
thing,
I think that's what car loans would do.
right.
But,
Yeah, by the way, one point I was going to make about this, which is that
yeah,
I mean, I'm not a big fan of like big developers, especially out of state developers,
right.
dropping boatloads of money and tipping the scales on elections. I don't like the fact that big unions, drop in far more than individuals. I don't like it when big developers do it. But I still feel that if somebody is a property developer
Yeah,
and they want to make the donation,
yeah,
right? And they're doing it because you simply can't make the presumption they're doing it in exchange for favorable legislation, especially if it's somebody who Counselor X has known there ever since they were kids together.
right.
I mean, I know people who were writing checks to candidates, and in some cases took a real snotty attitude that says, oh, I absolutely refuse to take your money, as if
Well,
somehow you're
meanwhile,
unclean.
they might take 1,000 from an individual, but probably not
Yeah.
these real estate. I mean, it's just like, where do you draw the line?
I actually think there
Brought up
was,
too. Yeah.
I mean, in McGovern, it's actually a combination of McGovern and Simmons.
Right. McGovern,
Uh,
I think, was a little bit on the defensive because if you look at the charts, he's probably the one that.
well, he is. He's the one who takes in the most money from
And
from
even
the
that, not
developers.
like this huge amount.
Well, he's actually huge. It's huge amounts.
Really?
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, yeah. 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 Like a gigantic percentage of his money was coming.
all right.
I think he's changing his ways somewhat. So, and I think he's willing to pledge to not do that so much in the future. But
Right.
he just wasn't going to turn it down. But I mean, I didn't publish all the information, but I did keep track of people. For example, the affordable housing overlay was before the city. There were quite a few people
Yeah.
who were affiliated with some of those nonprofits who were dropping serious money on some candidates because they wanted, to be able to get those projects.
Right.
So would they be forbidden from making those donations? Well, if you're going to have a common standard, then the answer is you should.
You mean
How
individuals that supported it? Or what do you say?
people who were actually worked for some of those developers, probably nonprofit developers. So yes, did they have business before the city? You bet they did. All right, but somehow that's okay. But if somebody who was associated with Cambridge Crossing, that's not okay. I don't know if I go for that.
Well, maybe they didn't
But
treat them as
there was one very valid point, though, I think has been made, though, which is that,
yeah.
and you can kind of, there's a lot of conversations that are between the lines when you listen to this stuff. Okay, so Dennis Carlone is coming in saying, we're going to restrict these evil developers because he's famously takes nothing, and he's been
Yeah.
consistent and great about that.
Yeah.
But the thing is, he also lives on Washington Avenue on Avon Hill. And if you're a professional person with a good pedigree, you probably know a lot of people who can drop $1,000 here, $1,000 there.
Government was kind of saying that, yeah.
Yeah, and the thing is, that's really true. If you're Denise Simmons, who's living on Harvard Street,
Yeah.
chances are you know fewer of those people, but you might know some of the property developers. So they kind of become, the $1,000 contributors that way.
Yeah.
So I think the logic of what McGovern and Simmons' argument was, and I think it has validity, is that, look, if you're going to say that evil property developers got business for the city, but you're not going to basically say that somebody who's sort of born with the silver spoon in their mouth, that they're not having an advantage. If this is about leveling the playing field,
right,
then let's really level the playing field. And I think
they're saying the 200.
they just cap it at 200. I don't think that's going to pass muster.
That one I think would require.
It would require home rule legislation, but there was one proposal that was floated. Several councilors said that they wanted to restrict how much money you could loan your campaign, and that's just ain't going to happen.
Right,
Because yeah, okay. So anyway, I thought it's an interesting discussion, and it's going to become sort of a hot topic.
Yeah.
So it didn't end last night, not by a long shot.
What did happen? Did they pass 2 proposals?
I did sort of down, I marked down a lot of the results of the council meeting, and I watched some of it on the videotape, watched some of it live. So yeah, that ordinance has been referred to the ordinance committee, so there'll be further conversation.
Or
Well, at least that one, I believe. Yeah, I'm pretty sure the one that came from McGovern, it was not yet listed as a city council order, but I believe he moved
yeah,
that that be referred to the ordinance committee as well. So there should be dual conversations.
at the
But
same time, two at a
I think the only way to do it is to sort of do it simultaneous, but
right.
politics being what it is,
Oh
I
boy,
mean, Dennis Carlone is co-chair of ordinance. He voted against referring McGovern's order
I know. Wait,
to the
aren't they
ordinance
both
committee.
unordinate? Aren't they co?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah. So the thing is that I think one co-chair is going to say, well, you can't proceed with yours unless you're proceeding with mine.
but
And
it
so
makes sense though to discuss both of them at the same.
absolutely true. If they're going to come up with Cambridge's version of a municipal campaign finance law, then they have to
But
address it
there's
in
something
full.
against that though. You can't take up one thing at an ordinance meeting.
No, you most certainly can.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
they would have some little technical thing about the rules. If somebody makes a motion, it has to be disposed of before somebody else can make a motion and whatever, you know.
That
But
would
in
have
terms of
to
what
be
goes in front of the
scheduled.
ordinance committee, they can take them up simultaneously, and they should,
So that hasn't
really.
been scheduled yet. I mean, there is an
No,
ordinance
no,
meeting, but that's not on the agenda of it.
no, and they're pretty much loaded up for now anyway. So
Oh,
it probably
well,
will show up in January or so,
yeah,
conveniently in a municipal election year, and then they're all going to turn it into,
I
you
hate
know,
that.
fodder for election campaign stuff.
Okay, can we
No.
talk about, because another one that confused me was the tear gas one.
Yeah, so that was, I think, from Sabrina Wheeler and one other counselor,
That had
maybe.
been charter righted also by Simmons, right?
That's right, and I think a part of the reason that there's, you know, there's the essence of a city council order, and then there's the implication.
Yeah,
Okay, so there seemed, at least Councillor Simmons suggested, and I kind of agreed with her, that
yeah.
there was an implication that somehow Cambridge
Had been
is
used,
just another bad actor, like you know, cities across the country who are tear gassing their residents.
yeah.
There was a reference into the order about police tear gassing peaceful protesters, whatever, without making reference to the fact that, yeah, but that's someplace else, not here.
Well,
So,
then Sabrina Wheel brought up the 1972.
you know, that, yeah, right. So the thing is, so what was happening in Cambridge in 1972,
Cambo.
48 years
Yeah,
ago,
right.
if we were to use the standard that somehow because something happened in Cambridge 48 years ago, that that language has to be incorporated into everything that's being proposed today, boy, we'd be nothing but historical
Well,
researchers.
he just wanted to be sure that people didn't think we never used it. I don't know.
You know, listen, cops used to use truncheons and nightsticks and all sorts
Yeah,
of things
right,
once
yeah.
upon a time,
They
but they
still do
don't,
these
and
things.
it's just
I
not
think.
part of it. So to me, it's not particularly relevant, but it is sort of part of the politics and
Yeah,
the rhetoric, which has been very prevalent for the last 5-6 months since the George Floyd incident.
yep.
You know, to basically, you know, it's something like, it's like marching orders. I'll bet you there are 100 towns and cities across the country who simultaneously were introducing some of these same sort of omnibus or, you know, kind of generic ordinances banning tear gas, forbidding military equipment,
Yeah.
you know,
Oh,
you
yeah.
name it. You know, so
Yeah.
it's just part of the movement, I think, really. I personally, I don't like orders that are effectively for show and
Yeah.
aren't actually effectively changing anything or doing
Yeah.
anything or
Yeah.
really seriously codifying thing.
Yeah.
You know, I've never liked them. I don't like foreign affairs related city council orders either, you know, because there's nothing you can do. You know, the city council is not going to depose a dictator in Libya, you
No,
know,
but
yet we
I think
certainly passed the city council order calling for doing that.
yeah, if it's in support though of a House or a Senate bill that maybe somebody in Massachusetts
Yeah, that's different. You know, that's just sort of a you know, a statement of support, you know, from the local level, state level, all the way to the federal. That I can. Not that
what
doesn't
about,
bother me
wait
in
a
the
minute,
least.
speaking of that, you probably have a copy of, remember the nuclear, what was that one? Larry somebody? I mean, he lived,
Larry Weinstein? No, no, he's with school committee. I know what
we
you're
had a
talking
whole
about.
nuclear, we had a
Well,
pamphlet.
it's really what created the Peace Commission. It was actually
Oh,
the Committee for
right.
Peace and Nuclear
Nuclear
Disarmament.
disarmament, right.
Yeah, and why am I spacing out on the counselor's name at the time? But it's true. It's true.
Well, he
Um,
wasn't a counselor that wrote it though, was he?
yes, it was.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah, I'm pretty sure. And
Yeah, I
again,
did something, but I don't know
I'm
what.
spacing out on the counselor's name. I should know.
All
He's
right.
still around, still around. I think he wrote a book recently or something, but
All right, we'll
just
have to come up with
spacing out.
something.
But
Yeah.
the thing is, so there was a time back in the early '70s where, where the campaign literature actually had a big target centered at Cambridge as being like target number 1 if there was ever a nuclear incident.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and that was what was that was what was being addressed. I find it interesting. This is kind of a separate matter, but
Yeah.
so that's why we have a peace commission. But the peace commission, how much the peace commission's mission today has anything to do with nuclear disarmament? It's like
Fine. Well,
zero.
things, yeah, but there's certainly lots of other things going on. I mean,
Right. I mean, I'm generally of the mind that though there will always be what I would think of as regulatory boards and commissions, like Board of Zoning Appeals, Conservation Commission,
yeah,
Planning Board, who have statutory authority,
yeah,
and they are standing committees that must exist. But then there are these other ones, advisory committees, as well as other kind of issue oriented committees, which it would be much healthier if
yeah,
they were simply commissioned,
yeah.
as a word,
It's temporary.
for a period of years,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
they would have to then be reauthorized after, let's say, 10 years, 15 years. The thing is, sometimes the mission just isn't there anymore. There was actually an oil recycling committee established that was still on the books. I don't think it was ever officially ended. It just stopped existing,
Yeah.
right?
But some of
And
the commissions, though, there's money attached to it. They get,
yeah,
yeah,
right. But so the thing is that if you set up something like one of the neighborhood conservation district commissions, where there is some kind of official capacity where they have to make decisions like that, um, you know, but something like peace commission,
yeah,
and listen, the head of the executive director of police commission is a friend. He's a great
yeah,
person.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not digging on the
Right.
boss.
Yeah.
I'm just saying is that some of these commissions maybe have to be rethought periodically, and maybe there are other issues that have come about. Like, why don't we have a commission on youth? Well, because we do have the kids council, which
Yeah.
is right. So maybe I have to take that one back.
I
You
just
know,
put up the ordinance. You're right. It was called the Cambridge Commission on Nuclear Disarmament and Peace Education.
and
I
peace
think
education.
not the
Yes,
nuclear disarmament part.
that's right. Yeah,
When it was established, so I was trying to find out the person's name, but I
yeah. But what happens is that eventually, what happened, at least in my recollection, I hope it may be imperfect.
1981. That's right. I remember it.
Yeah, but the
1988.
thing is what happens is eventually that whoever is in charge,
Yeah.
basically, when the original mission sort of fades away,
Right.
uh, it becomes sort of a self-perpetuating entity
Yep.
where the current members or the executive direct just decides to repurpose the committee. At that point, if the committee was established by a city council ordinance, but now it's taken on a life of its own to just do what it feels like. There's something a little
Well, we're very
awkward
generous
about that.
to our employees and our people in this municipality. We pay well, we get good benefits, and it's sort of entrenched. There's a lot of, I don't know.
Yeah, but the thing is that but all right. So if we would, maybe what we should do is we make it an exercise for the next municipal election cycle. Like, how would you reinvent some of these citizen entities? So, for example, we have a council committee on economic development, but why don't we have do we have a board of commission on economic empowerment that's really kind of going out of its way in order to actually do job creation and job linkages between people who are born and raised here to the
Doesn't it
job-based
come out
existing
of community
city?
development, though? Don't they have a
All
whole
right,
board
so there
of
is a city
development?
department that does that, but the thing
Yeah.
is that in terms of boards and commissions, do we have anybody who's really lighting a fire under that issue? Or is it simply left to a person who's working in some department to just sort of do the right thing? I mean, you could sort of take the point of view that, well, maybe we should disband the recycling advisory committee because, hey, don't you know, we got Michael Orr, he's a good guy, they know what they're doing, so
Well, the thing
therefore,
is, that's an example of a commit. No one's really being paid there. They already have
no,
staff that's paid,
well,
and I think whether
but
they.
but but the thing is the only commissioners and board members and commissioners in the city who get a salary, I believe, is the election commission. That's it,
No, what do
right?
you mean? The Peace Commission. He gets a salary.
Well, he's the executive director, so he's city staff, but I'm saying the
Oh,
board
okay.
members are not.
Oh, board, no, no,
Right.
but most of
And
these places have an executive director, don't they?
right, all the boards have some city staff
Okay.
person from some
Or
department
did it
who's
invited?
associated with them.
Okay,
Yeah, absolutely true.
all
Yeah.
right, yeah.
I just think we should reinvent this because there are other
Right.
priorities that are
You're
real
right.
today that maybe we ought to be refocusing our attention on,
That's
you
a
know.
good point.
And you know, so I don't know, maybe I'll make that a question I'll ask candidates next year. We'll see,
Oh,
you know.
God.
Yeah. So anyway, we'll find out here. By the way, there was one, I thought it was kind of a ridiculous thing, but I'm going to make a point about it. So it was
Yeah.
one item that was made subject to the charter right or left or tabled the previous meeting, and then they disposed of it. Had to do with a curb cut for Cambridge brands.
Oh, yeah. Well,
You know, the makers of Tootsie Rolls and Junior Mints, right? In Central Square, Cambridge, right?
but did you see the letter, though, that
I did.
they
But
sent to her, and it was sort of,
I know, but the point I'm going to simply make about this
yeah,
is that if you're a company who's
I
doing business in the city and you're employing people and you're doing your job well or
been around
whatever,
for decades.
yes, and did it
Right.
around for decades, is that whether you insult a city councilor inadvertently or not should have no bearing on your ability to get a curb cut.
But even before that, it was charter righted by Simmons v. Clark for the
That's
whole.
right. Exactly right. You know, I mean, I generally have misgivings about the whole concept of, you know, shaking down anybody who applies for anything. You say, well, you want to get zoning relief here? Well, what are you going to give us?
Well,
I mean,
he didn't
sometimes it's nice if they
say
do it
that.
voluntarily,
He
but
didn't say any of that. But yeah, I agree with you. I just feel like this was the wrong thing to get.
yeah. And I'm on the Central Square Advisory Committee. Cambridge Brand wasn't really expanding. What they do is they had to do major electrical upgrades and they had to reconfigure the building to do it. So they're doing a little bit of other minor changes as a
I
result.
know.
There's no big expansion going on here. They
Okay,
should
well,
have just
we
been
have
given that approval.
15
So
seconds left. So
yeah, so anyway, so we're winding down
you're
here.
right.
So
I totally agree with that. I'm all for Tootsie Rolls and all that. So
yeah, I'm for Junior Mints, absolutely. So
so,
anyway, see you again on Cambridge Inside Out.
bye.